That's my failure right there. Right there, that's C1. Rick said to me, you can punch a hole anywhere you want in the money pit. Free hole. You're shot. And based on my research, I've always believed that the money pit was farther to the north. It's been traditionally believed. Because the traditional area for the money pit area, if you will, is kind of in here, where all this kind of stained soil is, right about here somewhere, right? That's the traditional area of the money pit, been believed since 1893. But I believed it was farther to the north. So we put a hole down, a 6-inch hole. Jordan from Valley Well Drilling is here, and between 18 and 90 feet down, we put the side of a shaft. Right down the side of a shaft. Boom. I thought, bingo, I nailed it. Okay? So from about 90 to 110, we start getting splinters, and then we go into in situ material. It can't be the money pit. It's impossible. It can't be. Right? So what we often do is continue with a lot of these boreholes, continue down to bedrock. So as we're going down, at 171, it breaks out into a cavity 21 feet high, because you can see the drill bar drop right on TV. Right? Jordan says he's got no pressure on the bar. It's just the weight of the bar, and it drops 21 feet, boom, hit bedrock at 192. So we put a camera down in this thing. Right? This is a big cavern. Right? We thought, okay, well, it could be an offset chamber from something, from the money pit. Who knows? Right? So the camera goes down. David's looking at the monitor. He said, there's a shiny gold thing there, right? He says right on TV. Yeah. And it's forever been known as the shiny gold thing. Right? He has such a fantastic way with words. He would call that the big sticky up thing. Yeah, we were in Saltcoats Harbor in Scotland, and there's this monument right there, and that's what he said. He said it right on there. There's a big sticky up thing over there. Anyway. I digress. So the problem is with the camera is we don't have lasers on it, right? So we don't know if the shiny gold thing is this big or the shiny gold thing is this big. And we don't know its orientation. We don't know if it's in the roof. We don't know if it's in the wall. It also showed two openings opposite each other, but we don't know the orientation of those. We don't know if it's like this, like this, like this, or like this, right? So based on the shiny gold thing, they decided to put the 43-inch can down, right? It's anchored in the bedrock at 167. They bring in John Chatterton, who's a world-class diver. Google him, and you'll see his resume. It's about this long, right? We had Mike Huntley and his crew and all his equipment here. They made a series of dives into C1, right to the bottom. Guess what? They get down to the bottom, and they radio up to the control truck. It's not a 21-foot high cavity. It's a 10, 11-foot high cavity. We're thinking, where did the rest of the cavity go? Right? We think possibly when the hammer grab went in, it pushed sediment down into the floor. Right? That could be where the shiny gold thing is. In fact, there's a GoPro. There used to be two down there. They found one. But there's another GoPro down there. Divers couldn't find that. And at one point, they have a metal detector. It's going crazy on the wall. Just pinging like crazy. Right? And then all of a sudden, that conks up. So every time C1 comes off the table, something happens and C1 goes back on the table. That's all I'm going to say about that. Now, we all kind of have a shot. So Craig Tester picked up one. It's just the other side of that drill rig there. He's called Tester 1. And we go down through about 140 feet of in situ material, and then we hit wood and a void and back into in situ material again. So what we actually hit was a tunnel. But based on our research, there shouldn't be a tunnel over there. Doesn't make sense. So then Rick and Marty picked a spot, and it's called Gal 1. It's named after George and Ann Legina, their parents. So what we were looking for there was the debris field from the catastrophic collapse from the 1861 collapse when from the Oak Island Association, when 10,000 board feet of lumber dropped in the money pit 118 feet. Moved dirt and debris and mud along an 18-foot long tunnel and 6 to 8 feet up into shaft 6. We didn't find that. Well, we did find were those chunks of metal that's in the interpretive center. We thought, okay, we hit some kind of a metal box, right? We're all waiting for the big diamonds or jewels or, you know, a silver ingot or something, or Shakespeare's manuscripts or religious items to come up, and nothing comes up. Now, in the spoils, what Gary found, and we dropped those just north of 10X, he found a gold button, and he also found this very ancient spike. Right? But that's all we found in that. So a few years later, we're at the Beaton Institute in Cape Breton, in Sydney. And we see this report that M.R. and William Chappell had written about the construction of the chapel shaft. Now, the chapel shaft is approximately right in here. With 12 by 14, it went down eventually to 171 feet. And in it, the workers had a signed affidavit that when they were at the bottom and looking up, they can't see daylight at 171 feet. It walked to the north, that much. That's how much eau de plumb it was. So how they construct these shafts back then, they would timber on the outside, they put jacks, but they invert the jacks. And then they have what they call the cutting shoe and a shield. So what we actually hit was the cutting shoe and the shield. So they, instead of jacking something up, you're actually jacking something down. So it jacks it down into the earth. They excavate inside, reset the timbers, reset the jacks, and continue on down. So that thing walked to the north. That must have been pretty scary when you're at 171 feet down. And all you have above you are timbers and dirt. That's how much eau de plumb it was. Now, you see in the show, you know, it was H8. H8 was hot. That was a hot area. In fact, Marty still thinks to this day it's a money pit. Rick and I disagree with that. We don't think it is. But out of a 6-inch hole, when Brewster was here, that went up on the shaker table, right? Out of a 6-inch hole, we find 2 bones. The one that I found was a European. The one that Jack Bagley and Dan Hensky found was Middle Eastern. Also, what comes out of that is a piece of some parchment, not a piece, a number of pieces of parchment, some book binding, some leather, and shards of, actually some very strange purple-colored wood, and shards of pottery below 190, which is deeper than any searcher's ever been found. The maximum depth that we know of any searcher is 171. This was at 190, 19 feet below that. So H8 was hot. You know, I mean, they decided to put a 43-inch can down. And that can is just still there, by the way. It's just covered over the steel plate. So guess what comes out of the 43-inch can? Nada. Nothing. Out of a 6-inch hole, we get all that. But out of a 43-inch hole, nothing. We could have missed it by the thickness of the can, which is 1.25 steel. Very depressing, by the way. This is the same area where in 1803 they find the 90-foot or the 80-foot stone, depending on what newspaper you read, right? So just about, I would say, 20 feet northwest of C1 is where John Smith's house was, right? He could literally sit on his doorstep and watch what was going on in the money pit. In 1803, 1804, they find this stone. Had strange markings on it. Eventually he mounts it in his fireplace in 1810. Hundreds of people saw it. Right? He dies in 1856, but in 1864, right, the company takes it to Halifax, puts it in the window of a bookbinding firm, and with a number of other artifacts, and was used as an incentive for investment. That building is still there. It's part of historic properties, right, on Upper Water Street. But the designation of the street has changed, right? But that's where it was, Upper Water Street back then. Now, we made a number of trips into historic properties looking for the stone. So when you're down in the basement of historic properties, right, you have no idea where you are, because you're taking a pathway this way, and then it doubles back, and then there's a dead end. You got to go this way. It's a rabbit warren of hallways and dead ends down there. You have no idea when you're down there in relation to where you are above, unless you're on an outside wall. Then you have a kind of an idea of where you are. But when you're inside that thing, it's not open. It is a maze down there. It's the only way you can describe it. So we made a number of attempts to locate the 90-foot stone or the 80-foot stone. So just recently, last year, they had moved a whole bunch of equipment, right? And they opened up this area that we had never been in. So we made another attempt, went back. So Jack and Doug and I went back again, and we found a stone. Same color, same dimensions, had two initials carved in it, much like Captain Bowdoin described in 1909. But we think that is not the 80 or 90-foot stone. We think that is the stone that Captain Bowdoin saw in 1909. That's okay, he's part of the crew. Part of the Gerhardt crew. He knows what he's doing. Hey, Eric. So, we think that when Franklin Delano Roosevelt was here, we actually have a photograph of him in the Money Pit area. Right? He was here. He had a lifelong fascination with Oak Island, right up until Pearl Harbor. They used to send 2 reports. Gilbert Hedden and Professor Hamilton, who again were both high-ranking Masons, along with FDR, would send 2 reports. One to FDR, and the other one to King George VI in England. They both got regular updates of what was happening here on Oak Island. Because they were all high-ranking Masons. So, this is also the place in 1897 where they find a piece of parchment, right? And at 153, they drill into what they call the vault. And no, it's not the chapel vault like they say on TV. It's the vault, right? Even William and M.R. Chappell never refer to it as that, but on the show they call it, and I hate that. I literally hate that, and I refuse to say it. I told them, I'm not saying it, I'm not calling it that. And I don't care what you do. I am not calling it that because it's disrespectful, and it's a disservice to Fred Blair and the Oak Island Treasure Company to call it the Chapel Vault. That's a little brother doing one. Anyway, so that's where the piece of parchment was found. It's about half the size of my fingernail. It's written in an English script. It's probably VI or part of WI. It's written in India ink. It's a very, very tiny piece of parchment. Right? So if you go up to the tree line there, and you go down to New Road, or you go down Old Road, because we're men, we're totally unimaginative, and that's the only names we could come up with. So that's New Road, and that's Old Road, right? In this triangular area, there have probably been 40 to 45 shafts in the last 200 and some odd years, right? 224 years. Probably between 1,700 and 1,900 boreholes on the eastern end of the island, at least 16 to 1,700 of them right in the Money Pit area. And searcher tunnels. In fact, there's one that they dug a shaft 185 feet southeast of the Money Pit area, dug down 110 feet, and dug a tunnel right under where we're standing. It's still there. And encircled the Money Pit area, the purpose of which was to draw water away from the Money Pit area and then pump it out of that shaft. That was done in 1867 by the Halifax Company. But all they did was create more confusion here. I asked Dan once, I said, Dan, where's the hardest place you worked on Oak Island? Without hesitation. He said the Money Pit. He punched 40 holes himself. That's not counting Becker and all the other companies that were here, right? Brewster, Becker, Choice, and a number of other drill companies that were here. And Valley, a number of other ones. What they did in here. He punched 40 holes himself in the Money Pit, and he cursed every one of them. He said it's the most difficult place you could possibly work. You've got not only are you dealing with the geology, but you have equipment that was left down there, drill bars that were lost. Even Becker lost 300 feet of drill bars. That's 30 10-foot-long drill bars were lost down there, somewhere in here. That's 4.5 inches of steel, right, down there. You have old equipment, you have tunnels, you have shafts, boreholes. It's not an easy place to work. So when people say, oh, well, just drill a hole or just dig in the Money Pit and find it. Ooh, it's a lot more difficult than that, believe me. If that was that easy, this thing would have been solved a long time ago. In fact, if you were coming to this island, right, after the initial work was done, but nobody had done anything else, and you had a suspicion that something happened on Oak Island, given today's technology, without any of the other work done, you probably could solve this thing in maybe a year and a half, given today's technology. But because there's been so much destruction done on the island, so much activity, that compounds the problem. Now over here, this is shaft 12. This was discovered in the early 80s by Dan Hinsky, right? He actually, based on his research, dug down from the surface. Now it was a little higher before this, and he discovered that, right? So what we're going to do eventually is basically reconstruct that to show people what that shaft looked like, and then they put this retaining wall in to keep the hill back, because there's a lot of pressure coming off that hill, right, to move this way. So then Rick came up with this wonderful idea, and if you asked him, he would tell you that it was all our idea. But that's not true. That is not true. It was his idea, and his alone. We just agree with him 110%. And the purpose of this garden is to pay respects, to honor, and pay tribute to all the spouses of all the men who came to work on Oak Island, plus the female researchers. People that you're going to read about Xena, you're going to read about some of them, but a lot of them you're not going to read about because their names have been lost to history. But without them doing what they did, keeping those home fires burning, much like a military spouse, right? They look after things at home so the spouse can go off and do what they're trained to do. It's the same thing. So without them doing what they did, those men could not come to Oak Island and do what they did. There would be no show. You wouldn't be here. None of the crew would be here. There would be nothing. So it's our way of paying respect and honoring what they did, their commitment, and saying, our way of saying thank you. So it's a small thing, but on that piece of slate up there, there's a plaque, which kind of speaks for itself.